fine for me. I just want to make sure not to bore you with information everybody got up his sleeve
Yeah.
already. But now that
Well, Mr.
Mr.
Bernstein, why don't you
Anders,
kick us off, and then we'll see where it goes.
Sure.
that Mr. that sorry,
Hey, everybody, it's Valentine's Day, September 14th, and it's Tinderbox Meetup with Michael Becker. I'm Mark Bernstein, the developer of Tinderbox. It's been an interesting week as we've just finished a fairly heroic refactoring in Tinderbox land. 3,500 edits plus in 4.5 days. Uh, And it's a sort of thing that I would normally be terrified to do, but it came through in one piece. A side effect of this, aside from the code being nicer to work with, is we've stepped on several long term annoyances. Currently working, yes, especially arts. We've got your snapping text pane
Yeah,
finally.
I saw that. Thank you. Amazing.
So good news there. And here is Michael Becker.
Hey, everybody, welcome to our meetup and happy Valentine's Day. I don't know, did they? It's Valentine. It's not Valentine's Day in the UK, is it, Mark? Or is it? Is it a global thing on this day? I'm not sure. You're on mute if you
Same saint.
isn't it? I guess
Yeah,
so.
yeah. I think it depends on which church you follow, but yes,
Yeah.
I think broadly is an excuse to overspend on
Yeah,
pointless things.
I was watching the church of commercialization. Like I've got to swing by and grab a bear from my mom later today. So yeah, drop $20. So welcome everybody. Interesting day today. So we're gonna go around the room. Typically we have new people introduce themselves. Don't see anybody new. We have old existing people that have been here for a while. Hey Paul, nice to see you. It's been ages. How's things going for you?
Very, very well. She's kind of been absorbed in in things and watching the videos, but not participating. So glad to start getting back into it.
And I heard about in the forum your whole Devon Think Tinderbox workflow, so we definitely see that at some point.
Sure,
And then,
yeah, that was a,
which then kind of leads us to what we wanted to talk about today. So Mary Beth has proposed, following last week's meetup, to help guide us through a conversation of what does it take to get a non-technical muggle up and running in Tinderbox. How do we do collaborative work like what she and I have been doing false starts on and trying to work by writing a textbook together. And then an overarching, more kind of sociological question: how do we get more women involved? And what are the ways and approaches possibly for that? And so that's a topic that Mary Beth raised for me last week after our meetup last week, and I said, well, let's have that conversation today. And so she is volunteered or been voluntold to jump in and help guide that conversation today. And then the other thing that really drives a lot of what we've been talking about is what Andreas and a little bit of Dave Rogers kicked off near the end of last year, is this like Hitchhiker's Guide to Tinderbox, making it easier. And then the overarching theme that Andreas has really given us for the whole, what I hope to be the whole 2026 effort, is workflows, like, and how do we actually integrate our workflows together. So with all that in mind, let's jump into our conversation. Andreas, do you want to pick up where we started off, or should we just jump into Mary Beth?
either way is fine for me.
Well, why don't we pick up with what you started, and then we'll jump into Mary Beth.
Well, otherwise I would have said ladies first, but in this case,
Well,
um,
you had momentum, so I want to keep with that, and then we'll let ladies first go.
okay. Thank you very much, and hello to everybody. I was just confessing that I had a very exciting night, short as far as sleep is concerned, long and enchanting as much as experience is concerned, because we were going to and fro within the forum the other day to figure out how to have Claude Code talking to Tinderbox in a way that might be, yeah, might be enhanced the way we've been using AI for quite a while now. And I got some advice from Mark Bernstein and from Jacob. And then I said, okay, when it's AI time, why I'm not actually trying to use Claude Code to get me using this myself. And I just want to sum up a few technical aspects I need to get out of the way in order to say what made me happy, so to speak. Because I'm not talking about which way I got the MCP working with Claude Code and Tinderbox right now. I just start from the exact other ending of the scale we are usually starting off, namely from what are we supposed to work with, or what are we supposed to do with Tinderbox? And I think it is an understatement to say Tinderbox is a tool for notes. Of course, it might be that it's a tool for notes, but it is a workbench to begin with. And my dream was always that I have the tool of Mark Bernstein talking to what Mark Anderson achieved over the years. And not only that I can look it up, but while I'm working with it, I just need to make sure that both good spirits are at my side, making sure that the spark of idea I have is not getting lost and entangled whatsoever. And I just think I achieved this last night by having Croc achieving that Claude Code is talking on the desktop app to Tinderbox, which is not too exciting, but interesting to start with or to begin with. But the next thing I experienced was that AppleScript is so much underestimated as far as I was concerned that I need to engage it much more. And I use the author script of AppleScript to have Claude Code basically do everything I ever wanted in a way that not only having Claude Code looking at the reading notes within the AI folder, but looking at the entire knowledge universe Mr. Mark Anderson built for us as far as ATB-ref is concerned. And this sets me in the position that even things like creating stems, creating adornments, doing agents, and doing all the stuff for me is really just a matter of being fluent in the language I'm about to use in order to command Claude to work for me. Isn't that incredible? And probably it is as self-understood as it can be to you. It wasn't for me last night, so that's why I'm a little excited because I didn't sleep too much. But I just wanted to say that thank you to everybody, especially to you, Mark Bernstein and Mark Ennis. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Mary Beth, the floor is yours. How would you like to guide us in this conversation today?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Michael. Hello, Mark and Mark. I recognize Chuck and Art and David and Peter, and I recognize a lot of your names. So I've been in the room and I've been a quiet participant, actively listening, actively learning. So a little context to help us get started. I am in San Diego. I am a co-author with Michael of Mobile Marketing Essentials courseware. And I got him involved in that back in 2012, 2013, 2014, when I was looking for a mobile marketing textbook. And the one that I had been using in my program was never going to be updated. And so I was desperate. So I stalked Michael until he finally agreed to be my co-author. My goal is to find somebody smarter than me and help them make something happen for others. And that's what happened. So back in 2014, we got a contract. We all signed it. We brought it to our publisher, and then our publisher said, oops, we ran out of money. We can't honor the contract we created for you. So false start. It's a good lesson. And I know this is a lot of context, but what I'm trying to build is my resiliency. I'm trying to show you that I persevere, right? I am not easily thwarted. So I waited a couple of years, and then I came back to my team, Michael and two others, and I said, what if we donated a percentage of our revenues to student scholarships? Would you then go with this new model where we don't get any money up front, but we take a share of the revenues? And they agreed. So birth of Mobile Marketing Essentials courseware. And we were the third textbook. They now have more than 200. So we were innovators. And this kind of is the path of my life. Innovate, innovate, innovate. So today, I wanted to kind of find out from you all, how do you navigate the complexities of Tinderbox if you're not a tech person? Okay, so I do not consider myself a technology person. I was a communications and business and academic, but I've also had my own company since 93. And just to kind of give me a little cred, I created a banner ad for the University of Phoenix in 1993. Now, AT&T said they created a banner ad in 1996. So that gives you a little context, right? This was back when it was back to GUI and then into visual, So anyway, this is my little history. And the last time I've touched Tinderbox was in April. So I haven't opened it. What have I done since April? Well, I traveled around the world for the second time for 90 days solo, only using a mobile phone with me, did not have a laptop. Again, my second time traveling solo. And then I have since launched into my third book on travel, and I'm close to finishing and getting beta readers and getting that published. The title is 5 Steps to Solo Travel. So I thought this would be a great place, Tinderbox, to write the rest, to write the book. And I went back to my notes in April, and I haven't done anything since then on Tinderbox, but I've done everything in Word. And now I'm getting ready to send it out to people for beta readers, and I've got the Word. So that's a little context. I notice there's no other women here, and maybe you can ping somebody who's a woman who used to come to the group, and maybe we'll get their voices in here. But I do find this a very male-dominated, very tech group, and I have been learning from you. So I thank you. And I value Mark Bernstein and Mark Anderson's expertise. And so I just went back to some notes while Andreas was speaking, and I found some notes from August of 2021, Michael, when we were talking about knowledge management and how, you were giving me tips on how to get better at Tinderbox. So now I guess I'm a 5-year user. I'm on 9. That's the version I have. I pay for it myself. And then anytime I want to get it updated, I have to go to my university and I have to talk to my tech department and I have to ask their permission and I have to get their secret passwords. And so I don't use their computer for Tinderbox. So there's definitely a constraint, let's call it, right? So I'm using this personal computer right now. And again, I haven't opened it up since April. So that's an issue that maybe there's a workaround. But I do think that AI could help me. And I loved how Andreas was talking about Claude, because I've been hearing about vibe coding and how Claude is definitely, a tool that, and I loved their Super Bowl ad. In fact, all of my students, and my colleagues and my community has embraced the ad that Claude had in the Super Bowl last week. They think it was the best ad out of all of the ads. So if you haven't seen it, maybe go back and look at it. Maybe you have a vote on what your favorite was. But so I teach marketing. I'm teaching a class right now called Integrated Marketing and Sales Communications. And I teach at Point Loma Nazarene University. I also teach the class online to a different population of adult learners. So I'm teaching it three different sections, and we're using our textbook in all 3 of those courses. So to me, I went to ChatGPT last night. And I'm like, here are some of the issues that I'm having with Tinderbox. Can you kind of summarize what some of the positives that I'm saying are and some of the negatives? And just like Andreas was saying, it's a lot more than a notes tool, right? It's not that. I loved how he called it a workbench. I thought that was a great uh, way to describe it. Um, so it has some fantastic attributes and it helps me to kind of organize my thoughts. But maybe, maybe I'm struggling and maybe we can help each other, right? So one of the things it's, yes, it's only Mac. And secondly, there's if my employer owns the laptop, there's some issues with that. But then there's like this terminology thing that if you're not on it, it's a whole language that maybe I need a Duolingo for Tinderbox, right? Because I get confused between, prototypes and attributes and key attributes and attribute browsers and what the heck is an edict? Like it sounds like I'm getting, hit. So an action code, that sounds really fun, but like Michael has said, you forget to put in a colon or a comma in the right space and poosh, doesn't happen. So it's not intuitive for somebody who's a non-techie. So am I going in the right direction, Michael? Should I keep going or should I
I don't know. It's up to you.
Yeah.
Let's get
So
you said a lot. Let's see if you
so the last thing I want to mention is collaboration. So we really we spent hours trying to collaborate, trying to figure out how to bring this, version 12 into version 13 and put it all into, and we struggled.
Version 12 to 13 of the book, not of
Tinderbox. Yeah, of the book, right. And how we could co-edit it and how we could make comments and how we could share some things. And he had me download a whole bunch of other stuff to go along with it, like 20 other things, like Notion and Obsidian and all these other things that I still don't use, but it's kind of like isolated. So that's what I'm thinking. It's kind of like this isolation. So how can we, or should we, and I know last week's topic was about collaboration. And so anyway, that's the main discussion point I wanted to have. And yes, it would be great to have other women here. I feel like I'm kind of alone in the room sometimes. And I joined late last week, so when the time came to speak up, I didn't feel like I had permission. Now that's on me. Okay. I could have spoken up. I could have started talking about how we tried to collaborate, but it was like 10:15 and 10:30. And I was like, I don't want to start that. So that's when I called Michael and he led into me pretty hard and said, why didn't you speak up? And I said, I'm guilty. So that's why I'm here today to just, maybe you guys have some great insights or advice. Maybe you've been in my shoes. Maybe you felt the same way as I did, where I didn't have I wasn't smart enough to ask the right questions or whatever it was that kept me back. And I'm not shy. I'm certainly bold enough to travel around the world. How come I'm like not willing to speak out in this room? And you, by the way, you're all great people, and I feel like I belong today. So thank you, Michael, for that.
You're welcome. You've always belonged here. Okay, thank you for that. That was a lot, and it's great. So, how does the community react? What are your thoughts? And did anybody like capture the core themes that you heard? Maybe we start with that. What did you hear? Let's summarize. What did we all hear from Mary Beth just now?
I'll pitch in because I'm just off of an AI adventure this morning targeting undergraduates and trying to cultivate mentees, and they can be very shy. And I'm particularly thinking of one freshman female, and I'm wrestling with the issue of men kind of expect sharp elbows. Women are socialized, as you just described, Mary Beth, to hold back and not butt in. So don't have the answer yet, but it's a real issue, a challenge. So
Thanks. Is that David or Jim?
David.
Okay, yeah, okay. Thanks, David. I appreciate that. So, yeah, and I grew up in the corporate world. I mean, I was in the room with lots of guys throughout my sales career. And I've owned a woman-owned business and done business with lots of different entities, but this room can be daunting. I'll say that. Yeah.
And let me chime in with my own comments. And again, they might come across a little snarky, rude, and direct. But some of my feedback to Mary Beth last week was, how did I word it? Basically the way I worded it was, I'm tired of the refrain that's being pushed onto men just in general of toxic masculinity and patriarchy, and in this idea that we're not approachable and we're not collaborative and that we're not welcoming and opening. And this community in particular is far from anything of negativity. I mean, this is one of the most welcoming, opening communities that I've found anywhere globally. And so that's not. And so when Mary Beth came back and said, and you owned it, which I think is great. It's up to you to stand up, and that's what you're doing today. But I do think there's this social refrain that I think we're struggling with too. About that, and and even David's like, men want sharp elbows, and I don't remember the last word you used, David, but I'm personally struggling just in my own personal life, like wrestling these collaborative environments in a way that works. I don't know.
Yeah, and I do want to say this: when I was in my 20s and in my 30s, I did not want to join a woman organization. Okay, I specifically, if it had a woman.
Uh-oh, she froze.
Mm.
Yeah, you froze there. You froze there for a minute, here, Beth. And the one, but before not
yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say one thing before I forget, before my ADH brain loses it. The other thing that is real, though, is women for decades, for centuries, have been fighting this challenge of equality and the right to vote and the right to be here and the right to say their voice and the right for equal pay and the right for equal leadership. So that is real. And so I think there's a lot we're fighting here is basically the comment I was saying, and I don't know how to solve it. But go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was saying was I didn't want to be on the woman team. I wanted to be on the guy team because I saw them as the winners. Mm-hmm. And I saw the women organizations as the losers.
On that note, let me just make one personal comment, then I'll shut up. My daughter got so mad one time when we were doing the Boy Scout Girl Scout thing, and she's like, she's like maybe like 10 or 11 when she said this. She's like, I'm pissed. I'm sitting here in a room having to weave when my brother's off shooting guns and arrows. I want to go shoot guns and arrows. That looks like fun. He'd come back smelling like cordite, covered in gunpowder, and she'd be like having needle stitch things in her hands, and it was just like this dynamic that was real. But I digress. Let's move on. Do you have anything else to say before we let Mark and Chuck chime in?
No, but I in my 50s, I started saying, you know what, I think I should embrace women. Yeah. And I think so I started joining some women groups, and even my books are kind of my travel books that I write. So I have a pseudonym, Dr. Mary Travel Best, and I write books for women. And then I have the irony is I have a bunch of guy friends that say, why'd you do that for women? Because your book is just as good as any other book for me. So I was caught there too, several times. Yeah. I was trying to target market.
Sure. Mr. Anderson.
I just checked. I've got a number of notes from Mary Beth's thing, which is going to quickly summarize. So, Chuck, if you've got a quick point to make, I'll go behind you.
No, go ahead.
Okay, right. Yeah. So, I got three parts to Mary Beth's intro. So that we start out talking about sort of what you use and personal work issues and stuff, and then we went into a bit about sort of terminology and usage, and we end up in collaboration. So, I want to start in the middle because I think this gets the thing of it. The terminology thing is interesting. I think it, so I'll step back a thing. So I'm a non-neurotypical person. So most of my life has been standing outside the big tent in the warm rain, wondering why I'm not allowed inside. So I'm just going to identify as a human here. I'll go any further than that. But I think terminology, in a way, if I'm struggling, let me put it in terms of myself, because then it's not adversarial. If I find myself struggling with the terminology of a new thing that I'm having to do, the question I ask myself is, wait a minute, is it because I don't like the terminology, or is it that I haven't found the sort of, in a sense, the master decrypt for it? And I think most often it's because it's our natural thing. I mean, you look around the room here, most people are fairly well educated, so that, you know, it's a natural thing. You know, I'm smart, it's not working, so it must be the other person. We have a tendency, we want to assume that someone is wrong, and clearly that has to be the thing. Yeah. Of course, in reality, it's just new and different. It's not like the thing we used before. And outside this, we can loop back to whether the terminology can be made easier, because the answer almost always is yes. And to do that normally needs the fresh perspective of a fresh pair of eyes saying, I don't, you know, there is no in point to the thing that explains everything else. So I'm always open to new ideas on that. But in terms of thinking about sort of edicts and attributes, things, my advice is to not be too literal. You have to use a word to describe something. And the word, and it's Murphy's law that the term that's used may not individually for us be the thing that we would have chosen to describe it with. But if it helps in one's mind's eye to say that, well, what somebody else calls is X, I'm going to call it Y, that's fine. I mean, don't worry about it. In the forum, it helps if people use the terminology that's being used in general. And that's not a sort of tone policing thing. It's more so that we're talking about, you know, you're passing the baton and it means the same thing to recipient and giver. And that helps people trying to help people in the forum a lot. And I think sometimes that gets misread as you know, being overly pedantic on terminology. But I don't think that's where that advice comes from. Code is code is code. Computers are not humans. They just don't work like this. And the one thing they really don't work well at is incomplete information. So if you were to play back the transcript of this, most of the sentences you hear will probably be incomplete. You know, that's the amazing thing when you're trying to do speech to text, is that it's hard because half the words are missing. And whereas, so the missing semicolon might be annoying to us because we look at something, you know, we see a picture, and if the paint doesn't go quite all the way to the edge, we don't worry. In our mind's eye, we can just sort of fill that in. And so, if that feels stressing, I would say just give yourself some slack. Just understand that in this game, the rules are quite hard-edged, and you don't get to pick a different set of rules. So if you engage within that, I think it's easy to say, okay, well, find the things that work, and bootstrap out for that. It's one of the reasons, in fact, when, you know, has been said to me, the examples, for instance, that I use in ATBRef are, I think, fairly called verbose. The reason is, the presumption is they're trying to be reasonably self-descriptive. There are lots of bits you could make shorter or leave out, and a very practiced person probably would. Because when you're doing it for yourself, you don't have to explain to anybody else. But in writing examples, part of the thing is to try and say, okay, it's sort of hinting that this bit, you know, connects with that bit, and putting in all the optional bits, because when you don't understand code, you're absolutely right. It works, then it doesn't work. And frankly, you get no hints as to why it doesn't work. And it's fine, you can go to a sort of forum and get the kind of strangers there. But again, it doesn't even necessarily help if someone fixes it for you. That's today's fish caught, but not tomorrow's. And I think there isn't an easy way, and I think all of us find the bit we understand differently. And the thing is to dig in. Do use the forum, generally do use the forum, because the thing is, sometimes it's difficult to stick your head above the parapet and ask a question, because it's natural for everyone here to think, I'm probably asking a really dumb question. And the fact that someone knows the answer doesn't mean that you are a dumb person. It just means that somebody knows the answer. But if you don't know the answer, if you answer the question rather, you don't get that. I noticed I wrote down the word intuitive. I think the problem, this is a problem of the way that broadly we have, in the outside, those who work in the field of software and things, how people are being taught to use computers. The general paradigm is that it's like going to the slot machines. You put the penny in the right slot, you get a prize at the bottom. So you don't really get many choices. Your job is to press the buttons in the right order to get the prize. Tinderbox, fun enough, is not that. It's quite the opposite, which is, I think, why it's actually quite confusing to use. Because if you look often at questions that people ask in the forum, essentially what it reads like is that which button am I supposed to press to get the prize? And the question that will follow will be, what prize are you trying to get? Because in Tinderbox, you get a choice. And it's not, when I say it's different, it's not like different, better. It is just fundamentally different. Its aim is it's a toolbox. So you can go into your shed, your garage, whatever, one day, and maybe one day you just want to, you've got some timber and you want to make it a bit smoother because you want to use it for something, but nothing in particular. So you might get the plane out. Next day, you're making some shelves. So you get out the screws and the glue and stuff. And so in that sense, describing itself as a toolbox for notes, I think is quite opposite, which means it can seem unapproachable, partly because when somebody says, well, what are you trying to do? That almost feels like an insult. You're thinking, I'm clever, I know what I'm doing. Don't ask me to tell you what I already know. But really what people are asking is, depending on what you're trying to do, will essentially indicate the parts of this rather large toolbox you need to know. You don't need to, and virtually no one here needs to, or apart from perhaps Mark who builds it, needs to understand every part of this enormous toolbox. Indeed, there are some very dark corners where if you ask, the answer will be, this was made for someone 5 years ago. They still need it. You don't. Just don't worry. So that, avoid the sort of FOMO thing, fear of missing out. Find the bit you need. For instance, if you just need to make something because you're going to export to something else, learn a bit about the export process. Don't worry about what somebody else is doing. It may look really cool and sexy, but you probably don't need it at the moment. But it's there for us all to think, oh, I want they've got that. That sounds wonderful. But normally to do that thing, you often are starting from a different place from where you are, and you're actually going to a different end. So just be kind to yourself. The fact that other people are doing things that you don't understand is
Mark,
not in any way a judgment or reflection on what you're doing. So,
Mark,
Michael,
let me pause you right there because I think this is
Yep.
a inflection point. Now let's step into the project of Mary Beth and I trying to collaborate and write a book together. In that context, she has to step into the complexities of Tinderbox and templates and such so that we can actually get the book written. So if you're using it as a standalone, personal, albeit, Andres' comment, note-taking tool, and you're using it for your own uses, you can gradually move yourself into this language. But if you're entering into a project that has deadlines, that needs completion, that needs output to be published in a format to which Tinderbox is arguably the best tool to do in, if you're both on a Mac, then that graceful onboarding is not there.
Well, I have a thought on that, but let's hear from Chuck, and then I'll circle back. And
I just didn't want to lose on that.
Well, I sort of do, but otherwise we'll never get around to Chuck. So let Chuck speak, and then I'll give you a quick sort of follow up on that point, which isn't to counter it, but I think it's useful. Chuck.
Okay. Let me start by just speaking personally. At the age of 9, my parents divorced. We were living in Texas. However, by that point in my life, I had already come to realize that my mother was taking care of everything in the family, earning the majority of the income, and establishing the foundation for my life. After the divorce, I basically spent the rest of growing up as a single parent household with a mother who had moved from Texas to Rhode Island with us and her 3 kids, and got a job with the Providence Journal-Bulletin as a section editor for the high school section, a job that had been done previously by 2 men. She was paid half what the two men were paid, and she had the entire job. So I kind of grew up in a perspective where I realized from an early age that women had some distinct disadvantages. When I got to college, I was actually kind of intrigued that, honestly, there are a lot of women here in academic studies and in the engineering and computer science areas. I saw a lot of women, not the majority, but a lot more than we see today. And so I've kind of spent my professional life often questioning what happened to the women. If you look historically at the evolution of modern computer technology, women have played an extremely important role. You know, they just, I won't go into it, but
Well,
there's just an awful lot of
like Hedley Lamar invented Wi-Fi, right?
Yeah, just across the board, women were very important in the evolution, from Lady Lovelace all the way to modern times. Grace Hopper and is just one of many examples. So what happened, and why is this rather significant shift that I've observed in my professional career? And I think part of it is that the technology became centered around, not, I won't say sharp shoulders or sharp elbows so much as aggressive moving out. I sometimes call it the Silicon Valley mentality, aggressively pursuing the latest in technology objectives, and in a way that was often less community oriented and more power broker, market domination type of behavior. And I suspect that has been less appealing to women. And then I think there's another thing that just keeps happening. And to a certain extent, Mark Anderson, if you'll forgive the observation, I was sitting here and trying to think about, what you were saying from the perspective of Mary or some other woman. And honestly, we, myself often included, often speak in ways that sound a bit patronizing and condescending. Oh, yeah, this really isn't that hard. You can learn it. And I'm not sure that's the best way to approach people. I think we need to change the tonality in which we talk about the use of technology. Maybe one of the positives that can come out of AI is to put us into a different space where we're less likely to talk about, preach to the unconverted about the wonders of technology and start talking about, well, how do we use this stuff more effectively? I don't know, but I think we have gotten into a social divide that is unfortunate and is probably going to be difficult to undo. But I certainly appreciate Mary stepping up and sharing her observations. And then I will just, to put it on the table, I will say, yes, collaboration is the big impediment with using Tinderbox. And it's something that I think is well understood to be a limitation. And as a community, hopefully we can help address some of it. I'm seeing some, very interesting developments in that direction coming, not just from the developer, Mark, but also from some of the community participants that are taking us in a direction that recognizes the problem and begins to put forward some solutions. But I think it is a challenge. And I would also say that in many respects, having used Word for a long time with other people, collaborating and writing, I'm not sure it's the best tool for collaboration either.
Nor is Google Docs. Online, I can't.
Right, and then there's things like Google Docs, which everybody claims is a great tool for collaboration, and I really think that maybe that problem of collaboration has not been solved by the other tools yet either. So there's just some observations. So I've spoken enough. I will shut up.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say that, Michael, you always talked about, we're going to export to Pandoc. We're going to export to Pandoc. And I was like, what the heck is that? We never like I even there's that's like this empty, it's like space to me. Yeah. So the collaboration part, I still don't know how to export
Well,
anything from
and
it.
and actually, well, let's pause right there too. I think the other issue we're dealing with in terms of collaboration like this is also not. It's not just collaboration in the mechanics of the workflow of using the technical pieces. It's also freaking collaboration on the content. Like we would have fights over what these words mean and what the frameworks are and what the book should say and how it should say it and what the narrative is. And so you also have that conflict between the actual thinking and the real work that needs to be done and the tool that is being done in. And I think that separation between the technical and the thinking collaboration too, I think is an important thing to raise. Andreas.
No, I would just give the word to Mark Anderson because he said he would love to follow Mary Beth up.
Oh,
So,
please. All right, Mark.
Okay, so I'll be quick. So it actually is interesting. So thank you, Chuck. And I'll take that on the nose because it sort of links into actually what I'm about to say. Because I take your point. I mean, the bit I was actually trying to make a different point, but obviously I sort of phrased it badly in the sense that I think we. Yes, the word easy gets bandied around. Really, what I was trying to point is that no one should put themselves in the position of saying it's too hard. I spent most of my working life as a consultant, basically an information emergency plumber. Everywhere I turned up, the salesman had left, the kit didn't work, and they had no money left, and nothing worked. And that was always my starting point. And in fact, vast number of people, probably the large number of people, as it happened. I'm appalled to consider probably were women because of the areas I was working in. I was doing a lot of stuff to do with image libraries. They would tend to be, they were sort of back functions that weren't pure IT, but they were effective for, they were actually entirely technical. It's just no one who worked in that area thought that they were technical. And so one of the things I found myself said, no, look, the wrong way to frame it is it sort of it's too hard, or I haven't been told, or I haven't been allowed. You just have to allow yourself, and there's no easy way to say that. And I don't mean that. I genuinely don't mean that patronizing way. I just mean it, because no one else can give you that permission. Say, okay, fine. And where that links back to what I was going to reply on was you mentioned export and templates, and the word easy. What I was alluding to there is gets us back to something that's cropped up before. Is don't try and eat the whole thing at once. So, for instance, if the issue is in order to be able to share this, I've got to export something. You mentioned going things as, for instance, exporting something to Pandoc. The first thing is, that thing, and that's how I learned export in Tinderbox. I wanted to make an HTML page. I knew a bit about HTML. I'd used it in the early 90s, sort of thing, but I didn't really quite grok how it fitted with Tinderbox. So I just made the simplest things, and then I make that work, and then I'd add one more thing, and actually pretty quickly I was knocking out. So that the fear and the mystique of just exporting something disappeared. From that, I could then go and build something more complicated. This is why you'll see in the forum, I constantly say, well, look, make a small test first. Don't do it in the document you're working in, because now all this other stuff crowds in. Just sit down today. I'll make the smallest possible document. And my only aim in doing it is that at the end, I'll have achieved whatever aim it was I had. And I always find a good thing was then to commit to throwing away the document. Why? Because what you were committing to was to learning, not to having another document kicking around on my file system thinking, oh, I might need it sometime. So you got that, okay, I get it. I get how a basic export works. So my challenge to myself is when I open the new document to do it, I will understand and it will work. If not, you can sort of loop around. And I think that way helps get around any sense of there being a gatekeeping about the technology, which I genuinely think isn't intentional, or certainly not in this community, especially with such an open-ended tool. It's just that it is hard, but only if we allow ourselves to think it like that. There is an element of learning that comes into it.
Let me respond to that really quickly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
what
sure.
I'm hearing is we need a 5 steps to Tinderbox, just like I did a 5 steps to solo travel. Does that resonating with anybody here? Like, so in my travel books, I say, don't go to Italy on your first trip. You're going to have a miserable time. Like, go to the next town and spend the night there. So what you're suggesting is play and go to something that's so easy that you can't fail, so that you'll build confidence in yourself. Am I hearing that?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and that and which is in a sense why, for instance, ATBRF is written the way it is. And you may occasionally see me sort of actually step up and say, "No,
When
that
you
I am
say
not."
when you say
Sorry.
ATBF ref, I just go like that, just glazes.
Oh, sorry. This is a website that I've so when I was learning Tinderbox back in 2003, someone kindly sent me a document that happened to be called ATBRef, a Tinderbox reference, and after a little homage, I've kept that through the years, and essentially it was my, the old stenographer's notepad. I had all this stuff scribbled out, and then I learned already in the 90s, this is ridiculous. The kindness of strangers taught me, just put it online because you can be sure someone else has the same problem. And from that, I learned, and also by writing as it happened, one of the things I had to learn to do that was to learn export, which is one of the earliest parts of the app that I learned. But all these things sort of became an exercise. But if you look at this resource, it doesn't tell you how to do anything. It explains what things do. What does that menu mean? What happens when I press that button? Because it's a toolbox, because it's not a press the buttons in the right order tool. Writing a how-to, a sort of 5 steps is actually remarkably hard, simply because nearly everyone is trying to do something different. And I know that just sounds wrong and counterintuitive, but the reality observed over 20 plus years of assisting in this community is that actually that genuinely tends to be the same thing. We're often doing something similar to somebody else, but we're either doing it in a slightly different way because our personal style is different, or we're doing it on a different domain, a different subject area or something. And all those little subtleties combine quite quickly to mean that I can't just take what you're doing and treat it as a cookie cutter for what I'm doing. So, and then all that little bespoke tailoring is the bit where most of us think this is rubbish, it's too hard, it doesn't work. And which is why, if one can bear it, just doing these little small exercises, giving yourself the building blocks, say, oh, right, what I now get is that when, Michael says, do this and see it in Pandoc, I don't need to worry about Pandoc, because until I can export something to go into Pandoc, it matters not a jot. And then by the time you get to that next thing, you'll realize that when it says, oh, I'd like some information in XYZ forum, you'll think, oh, yes, I don't know how to do that format, but I can see how it could be done. Or at least I know enough to ask a question where someone can explain to me the missing bits. And that's, I think, how it ratchets together for anyone. But I'm trying to be very open about the fact that I don't think it's how software is taught to people. I don't think it's how most software presents itself. And so this odd salon de refuse is because most people turned up here. The normal entry story to this community is people say, right, I've had it up to here. I'm not using this anymore. I'm not using that anymore. And then they'll give you a long list of things. And the irony is to then say, so how exactly do I use this very open-ended tool I've now acquired, which is a cruel irony. But again, I think the thing is just small steps. And when I say small steps, I don't mean in a patronizing sense. It's just pick things, consumable size problems, and ratchet out. But and Mark, pick things that are closest to what you're doing. Yeah, I'll stop.
Mark, I want to go back to another thing, though. As Mary Beth said, the challenge with the tool, and I tried this earlier on in the beginning. Here are the 5 things on how to do this. This is what I did for this marketing problem I had. And 99% of the people time I got back, I don't care about marketing. Right? So that doesn't solve my problem. And I'm like, it actually does. Right? And so that's the problem with Andreas calls this a workbench. Others can call it, Jacob, what term did we use yesterday? Information development environment?
Oh, you called it an IDE, yeah.
Or an IDE.
Integrated development environment.
Yeah. So it is all these things. And so one of the challenges when you have a really flexible platform like this, you try to define the flexibility, people get lost. You try to provide a concrete example, they said, that's not my problem. And then you have the mix in between those two, which it makes for the confusion. And I think that's a real live wire issue with something like what we're doing here.
Well, I think there is an answer to that, but let's hear from Andreas first, because
Yeah.
I don't want to monopolize conversation.
Yeah, Andreas, go.
No, please, Mark Anderson, go ahead.
No.
I'll try and be succinct, because I genuinely, I don't, there's awful listening to just one voice. Yes, it is difficult, but I've written enough demos over the years, have the scars on my back to prove it, is that it's actually remarkably difficult. Very quickly, you're writing a demo for one person with a tool that's open-ended. It's annoying that it is that way, but genuinely, that's how it rolls out, because essentially, because so little is compartmentalized, there are no wizards, there are no, pick this from this sort of gallery of things, which is sort of what we used to do. So we have limited choice, which can be very rich if those are the only choices you need. But in this sort of environment, the whole point is it allows you to have a really raw interface, in a sense, to your thoughts. So you put stuff, the atomic element is a note. You put your thinking, the information you have into that note. And Tinderbox lets you get very, very close to that. You decide what you want to do. You may want to just pump it out to a web, to an HTML document or something like that. You might be wanting to stick it in a map and think about the serendipitous sort of collaboration you can make between things. You might want to explore the relationships between things. And each of these broadly will use a different part of the tool. It might use a different view. So, I mean, there are 10 views in Tinderbox. Most people probably use one or two, and that's fine. But some of them are really, really well tuned for certain sorts of activities. And again, that can be quite overpowering, because you're sort of thinking, well, I've only just half learned how this thing works, and now you're asking something else. But again, if asked to do that, I would say, well, it's sort of looking for, okay, this is what I think this view does. What do I know? What do I have as a problem that I can use in this thing?
So
in this view, for instance.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to say that I think I have a good idea about the 5 steps to Tinderbox. And let me just explain how I view this, and compare it to my book on travel. So every other travel book out there, Rick Steves' travel, Frommer's travel, any other travel book, assumes you already know everything about travel and tells you all about what to do when you get there. But there's a million places and there's a million ways to get there and back. But what I did was I turned that equation around and I said, I'm going to write a travel book that does not assume and that gives the basics. And that's why I developed it into 5 steps. There could be 10 steps or 25 steps, but what I'm saying is for Tinderbox, and follow through with me here, we could kind of build a step-by-step so that people don't have to get frustrated enough to get into this room. Like if this room is built for people who are so frustrated that they're about to give up, that's not maybe the goal of growth.
No, I think on that point, I think you
get them there step by step in a positive way and build their confidence.
I think you mistook his point. His point was they got fed up about Tinderbox and came to this room, this meetup. What he's saying is they got fed up about every other piece of software in the world and finally came to Tinderbox and said, this is the only solution.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. So, but the cruel irony in that little story is it took a while, but the pennies fell. Is what generally happened is what people were actually fighting against was that they got to the point where they wanted more control. That would very rarely be the way they expressed it. But if you looked at all the things they said they didn't like about the last thing they used, except for the fact that they'd be annoyed that the thing they're now using wasn't like the last thing. But again, that's just how experience screws with us. What's logical is what we did before, not what we're doing now. But what tends to happen, I mean, I think a thing that the people who are getting who find a sort of natural home using a tool like Tinderbox is because they want that degree of control, and they come to accept that well, it's the old joke about, with much power comes much responsibility, in the sense that, okay, so there is a modicum more of learning. You don't get to just push the buttons, but you don't mind, because you realize that unless you write your own buttons, they're never going to be the right buttons to push. And that's, I think, what I was trying to surface. And anyway, the place to go if people are frustrated is more often the forum, because it can sometimes take quite a long time to sort of wind into the heart of what a particular person's problem is, which is often a blend of what they are doing, the style in which they like to work, and the way that interacts with Tinderbox. And I went. Let's hear from Andrews.
Well, I actually don't know where to start. Let's choose starting with a bold statement. Everything you just said, at least as far as I'm concerned, was solved last night. All right. I love your reaction, Jacob, because you were one of the inspiring sources of my enlightenment, my epiphany, or whatever you guys might like call this. But before I start, thank you for Mary Beth for being with us, for pushing us. Thank you, Jack, for letting us know the long way you've come. You are one of my heroes and teachers as well. And I just have to let you know that once we stop having those questions and conversations, we are almost over with the forum and the community, because, as Michael said it, this is what is going to be the overarching topic of what we are doing from now on. Because we will be able, and if you like, I will showcase something a few minutes from now on. We'll be able to manage all that. Take me. I'm not a programmer. I don't know anything about code. I'm the first one who is holding hand with you, Mary Beth, seeking for the semicolon or whatever is missing from the code. This is not a problem anymore, because I handed over to Claude and let it do the stuff for me. And if Jacob had just gave the solution to me, I probably would have not gotten on my butt last night and figured out what I figured out. Means we can connect, and I say it again because I'm not certain whether Mark Anderson was with us at the beginning. Mark Bernstein created a tool for notes, which is a workbench for me. And once you know how to use it, the problems of how to get stuff in and how to get stuff out, how to collaborate, is just a matter of putting forward the right questions. Say you're creating some stuff, maybe you do it in Obsidian, maybe you do it in Apple Notes, maybe you do it in Markdown, maybe you do it in Devonthink, or you do it directly in Tinderbox. You're molding it, you're working with it, and then you're using something like Claude, export it to the Notion or whatever collaboration platform you love to work with. Then you do your stuff over there, and then you have Claude re-import all the information and update it on the fly. And that's what I have to tell you. When I was working last night, I was giving wipe coding commands, and I was sitting in front of the monitor, and I was almost tearing, because like a movie ran in front of me, creating all those stuff that Mark Anderson just minutes ago said, you might need to look it up. You will find it there. You don't have to know anything. Of course, I do not have to know anything, because I don't have a time to know anything about this stuff. I just hold on. I need to. I just dumped my water on the computer. I need to be back in a few seconds. Oh my goodness.
Sounds like you guys had a meetup before the meetup.
No, just 90 seconds before he showed up.
No, I mean last night or something like that. Yeah. So is anybody else using Claude?
Well, yeah, many of us. But I do want to comment too. My challenge with Claude is there are a lot of different AIs and a lot of different purposes. And Tinderbox is refined for Claude right now. But saying Claude is the answer to all AI integration and note taking, I think, is a bit of a bit dangerous.
Yeah, this vibe coding thing might be.
But Mary Beth, let's go back to your comments. So like collaboration and I do want to come back to the point I tried to raise earlier. Like how do we collaborate in an environment when you don't want to learn about templates, you don't want to learn about action code and libraries, you don't want to learn about, Jacob, the things you and I were talking about yesterday, the things that automatically number the chapter and headings so that when you do produce an output, the structure is correct. So how do you separate out the mechanics of Tinderbox from the thinking within Tinderbox and then collaborate through the internet? She's in San Diego, I'm up here in the Bay Area, to co-collaborate writing in a Tinderbox file. And is that Git? What's that intermediary layer that will allow us to co-create, co-write in this environment and then have a consistent output? And I kind of throw that out to the community. Because again, you don't want to, and the part of the other challenge we had is I was learning to drive the Ferrari at the same time we were trying to do it. If we tried to collaborate from the start today, probably would work better, because when you and I were working, our the code I was writing had shit tons of bugs in it, and it didn't work. And so that also led to the frustration. So, so how do we do this? Anybody? Jacob, you have any comments? You've been quiet. Roger,
I have comments as always, and then I think Chuck and Winham had their hands up, but yeah, I think that this is an interesting space. Like, I haven't personally tried to collaborate with others using Tinderbox, but I imagine that you could use like a Git or GitHub backend to facilitate changes and stuff to the file. You'd have to kind of work out the workflow, and I imagine you could also use stamps to update things for you and all that, so you don't have to like go out to the terminal and run Git commands or open up Tower or that sort of thing. So no, I think that there's something there, and I think it's kind of an interesting problem for the community to figure out. I don't know if I'm optimistic that Mark wouldn't have to build anything super special into Tinderbox to facilitate workflows like that. Anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I think it's interesting and
but
worth
my only
exploring.
comment to you there yesterday is, yet we're not, like, even for me, like you and I were talking about Git yesterday, and it's easy, it's intuitive, it should be simple.
I don't know about that, but okay.
I'm personally freaking out about Git. I'm like, what the
No,
hell are you
and
talking about?
I think that's the wonderful thing about Tinderbox is that you can write action code and stamps and things to put those cookies on the bottom shelf so that someone doesn't have to go into the terminal and write commands or open up another app to do the commands for them or whatever. So again, I'm optimistic that Tinderbox has all the tools we need to facilitate collaboration in a sort of remote environment that you've articulated, Michael. Again, I'm speculating, so who knows? But I'm optimistic.
Nice. Win, you get to chat. You're on mute.
Chuck had his hand up first.
Yeah, it's all right. Chuck talked before. Let's let you chime in.
The only thing I think I can say about collaboration right now is Git would be great for when it works. And it feels like when there's a conflict, it gets to be a mess.
Yeah.
And there's a big divide there. It is not smooth in between. I think some experimentation would be interesting, but I think that trying to resolve the conflicts is kind of a challenge.
Well, and on that note too, in the case of like Mary Beth and I, we're trying to write a book and we have a publisher deadline. So trying to get get the collaboration tools and workflow working and actually get the work done, that creates a certain level of stress that is really difficult to overcome.
So that is certainly true. And that's probably not the right time to develop the Git workflow for it. But I'd like to come back to Mary Beth's idea about sort of ways in to some of this for people who are newer to it. The answer is yes, there are 100 different ways to do whatever it is you want to do. And so if you're starting out, one good one is all you need for it on maybe 50 different little things that you might want to do. and having the micro lessons on, I want to do X, and here is the simple way to start with it, seems kind of sensible. Um, because I think most people coming to it, not wanting to do really complicated things, although as Mark, both Marks know well, sometimes what they want to do turns out to be a really complicated thing. It just seems like it ought to be simple for it. But the having the library of sort of simple worked examples for, here's the basics for doing a template, here's the basics for doing a thing, seems like it could be both a nice community collaborative adventure, but doesn't have to be, this is how to learn everything about it. This is how to get to the point where you can be part of the discussion of these things. Because I think a lot of what Mary Beth was saying at the beginning is true for many who show up at this meetup, regardless of gender, in terms of the reaction to just what happens. I think that there's a lot from the history, as I'm aware of it, which I will say is small, but some of women in computing, that makes that look like more of the same, which is in treatment of women, but I think it's actually separate. It's just that things are complicated here, and we don't always do a good job of bringing new people into learning what they need to know to make progress.
Chuck. Unless anybody
Okay.
else wants to win.
I'll just comment on Jacob's observations, just as an example. First of all, I'm very impressed with Jacob. I clearly am going to follow your every word, because you're clearly much, you've got a lot of insights and technical expertise that I appreciate. However, starting off a conversation which indirectly is aimed at people in Mary's situation, talking about Git and Tower and GitHub and whatnot, that's just got to be throwing it totally out into this world of, God, that's more terminology. What the hell is that? Why would I want it? How does that solve my collaboration problem? And what I was thinking about is that in many respects, almost any endeavor into anything that we do in our lives that addresses real world complexity gets into these problems of, we have a lot of friction as individuals to overcoming the obstacles to getting to an understanding or a capability or a skill set that we need to tackle some of these objectives. One of the things that I've done over the last quarter century was try to learn to play the violin. And I got up to a certain point where at least I could not be terribly embarrassed by what I was playing. But now my hand arthritis has gotten to the point where I probably won't be able to continue doing that. But in that process, I kept confronting something which is an area that I deeply appreciate: music. I love music, but the getting to being able to play music, to be able to use an instrument, to understand notation, to understand all the nuances of music and how you reproduce it, is incredibly complex. And it's, as I was listening to Mary, I was thinking, one of the areas where we see women participating every bit as much as men these days, not always the case, but these days, is in music, of all types, from pop to classical music. And clearly there is no difference in capability between the genders. So what is it about these subjects? And I think to a certain extent it's the sociology that builds up around the complexity of overcoming getting there. If you're going to tackle music, you've got to spend an enormous amount of time practicing and acquiring skills that are not comfortable, that take time, that take effort, that take repetition. And I think any of us who have tackled technology subjects know the same is true there. It just doesn't come if you don't put in that kind of effort. And yet we want to do something. I want to play an instrument. Well, yeah, wishing is not giving you the results you want. And I think that maybe a lot of the problems we confront are that, to a certain extent, we've made it difficult to approach these subjects in a way that gets people to where they want to go. So if I think back again to the subject of music, Dr. Suzuki developed a pedagogical training program for violinists. He took 2- and 3-year-olds, introduced them to the violin, and by the time they were 5 or 6, they were playing very impressive classical music. What does that teach us? Well, one of the things is it doesn't work for someone who's in their 50s. I can tell you that for sure. It only works for very plastic minds that have not yet been shaped by all these other issues. And so the whole problem of addressing some of these issues winds up being not just gender, but is also our generations. That when we learn something at a younger age, it tends to stick with us in ways that you can't necessarily retrofit on somebody's older. At the same time, somebody who's older has insights and understanding that the 20-year-olds just don't have. And if I look at this group, it's not just gender aligned toward men, it's also age aligned toward those of us who are getting into the retirement age, if not well beyond it. So there are these sociological divides that start occurring around the impediments and the challenges to getting to where you want to be. And I think we just have to recognize that and understand it. And to the extent that we can develop approaches, I love your suggestion, Mary, about 5 steps. I think other people have been talking about similar things. How do we develop the training methodology to get people more comfortable with Tinderbox and using it? And I don't have the answer for that. I've looked at it. There are certainly some things we can do. Dave Rogers was, pushing forward the better practices approach, and I think that that's got merit to it. Mark has been developing the reference guide for Tinderbox for 2.5 decades or more. All of that helps, but yet it doesn't overcome the barrier that getting to know something so you can use it effectively requires effort. And if I go back to the issue that you brought up, Mary, of using Word, if people are going to use Word for collaboration, then it requires, if you're going to be effective, learning templates in Word, learning how to do styles correctly, setting up style sheets.
Remember the
that
Staples
work effectively.
easy button. It was
using styles that effectively allow you to then integrate your works with other people, learning how to do the revision tracking and how to leverage that. All of those are things that I see most people who use Word never understand. And they are continually frustrated trying to collaborate with other people using Word because they haven't learned those basic tools. So I think there's the collaboration is just one example of where technology impediments get in our way. We want to work with someone else, just like we want to learn to play an instrument. And to get there requires some understandings and some coming to a meeting of minds about how you're going to do things that are not necessarily comfortable, that require effort. an expenditure of time and personal resources to get there. And maybe that's just human laziness. We have a hard time doing it. But working together, maybe we can make some progress. Maybe AI will help. I just, I don't know. We'll see. It's a path to go down and a challenge that we still have to confront.
Thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate that. Yeah. My personal experience with the forum is I look at that forum and I go, it's just, it's not a user, it doesn't appeal to me to go searching through it. It's kind of like, where do I start? So that's my initial impression when I go to the forum. Yeah. Just giving feedback, but thanks, David, and thanks, Chuck, and all of the, and Mark, you have your hand up.
Yeah, well, let's address the last one first because perfectly fair point. I don't think of the forum as an encyclopedia. There's no harm in looking if you have something that you think has a fairly precise, a less usual term. If you look up something like export, well, you're going to get, I don't know how many years the current forum's been running. You're going to get an awful lot of stuff, some which will be out of date, some which won't be relevant to what you're doing. If you have a sort of narrower term, it may be useful. But sometimes the thing is just ask a question. And actually, the encyclopedia will then work. Someone might say, actually, take a look at this. It's been done. If it matches what you're doing, or more likely to say, some of the stuff you want is covered here. You might also find this thing here, or this demo you didn't know about might be useful. So I think if that helps as a way to see the forum isn't something where I think you should think you need to read everything. I mean, for one or two of us who sort of, I'm an admin and a moderator and everything, so I do, but I certainly would be very surprised if everyone here reads everything because not everyone's interested in every aspect of the app. So just a thought on the forum. Quick thing on the 5 steps and the framing. It is very interesting. So one thing that's certainly useful, and because I think a starter's perspective is massively valuable because you cross that threshold but once and you can never go back in any given subject. And it's very hard, having crossed the threshold, to remember what you didn't know before. So as well as 5 steps, one start point might be, what are the aspects that you found most impenetrable? Because it may be the information's there but not well presented or surfaced. It might be that you reveal a perspective that just at the moment isn't covered. Doesn't mean it can't be. So most of these things are omissions. That just definitely sins of omissions are not intentional, because so often, I mean, almost daily, someone will turn up with something that's a bit odd and turns out it hasn't been done before. You can imagine that somebody might do it, but it turns out they may be the first person to do it, and it has some, it throws some challenges of its own. So just I bear that in mind in terms of thinking about the 5 steps. And it is, doing starter stuff is hard. I don't think Dave's here today, but I think he retired to lick his wounds after having raised his head above the parapet with a very well-intentioned idea of having sort of some best practices and started. But people, without being difficult, were just generally inquiring, saying, well, so from what perspective, where do we start? Because that is one of the challenges with an open-ended tool. If I'm just doing spreadsheets, I probably don't need to worry about drawing tools, or I don't need to worry about spelling because we're mainly using numbers. So there is a very genuine challenge, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't address it. And the other thing I quickly wanted to touch on was coordination. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, we rushed down the rabbit hole of sort of Git and this kind of thing, which Git always, I put in the comment, Git always frightens me. I take everything I really value and put in a place I can't see. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Anyhow, something that's really come on a pace really since the pandemic are the very tool we're using at the moment. Tinderbox was never designed as a multi-user tool. And that's at the heart of a lot of the sort of friction you're hearing, because, well, it's not designed for 2 people to be writing in the same essentially in the same file at the same time. But there are lots of things that you can do rather than trying to do it in a completely technical way through a sort of back-end storage thing. You could, for instance, just have a collaborative Zoom call. And if you give the other person editorial control, you can have a Tinderbox open and you can be reading the same article. And either of you, as need arises, can edit. Now, two people are editing into one file. The one file is living in one place. By the wonders of sort of Zoom and video, you can do that. It's more difficult to do on one laptop, and I'm conscious I have the privilege. I'm sitting at 3 screens at the moment, and I have a couple more behind me for other stuff. But that's the other thing. It's easier often when you're also in office, in the loosest sense of the word, maybe than doing lots of traveling. But I wouldn't overlook that as a really quite useful way of doing that sort of collaboration. If you genuinely want to be doing that, it's probably more you.
Michael and I did that back in 2021, 2022, right, Michael? And then we would try to copy and save the updates, and there was so many different updates, and yeah, it was like the file was saved.
If you have a call and you do so, you get to a point, you can at least save the file at that stage and share it. Now, at that point, your two files will diverge because simply two people are now editing two files, and you simply cannot get around that. Right. And for all the magic of something like, it doesn't matter what the acronym is, gets been knocked around because that's the winner at the moment. But magic thing behind the curtain, I don't think solves this problem. It's not really I think, designed for that either. I mean, it can do, and for people who are well versed and grounded in sort of like software design practice and all that kind of thing, it's useful. For a wider group of people, I hate me doots. I just think it's probably stretching a bit too far. And the most useful thing to do is, if you need to do that close collaboration, I actually think probably doing it on a shared edit via a Zoom call, in other words, the two of you driving one machine, is probably the most effective way to do it. Because when you get to the end of your editing session, at least you have one sort of truth at the end of it stored. It's difficult if you then want to go and do different bits. That said, there's nothing to stop, as I think Mark put in the chat earlier. You say that, well, I'll work on this bit and I won't touch the other bits. And then you can again meet and merge those bits. Where it gets problematic is if you have a lot of automation built in, you're not just moving notes around. So then you have another decision point. If you want to go down that route of saying, well, okay, what we'll do is we'll write stuff and then we'll sort of merge the notes together, you probably want to do it in a simpler document without a lot of the automation built on, and approach the export process in a different way. This thought arises to me literally just as in saying this. The answer to all these things is, but that's not what I want. But that tends to be the way life rolls, isn't it? The only thing we want to do is the one thing we're not allowed to do. But I think there are solutions, and the thing is to sort of think around the edges, look for the bits that do work rather than the bits that don't. But and hold on to the fact that the tool was never designed as a concurrent multi-user tool. So every time we try and force it in that direction, it's going to sort of give some friction in unexpected ways, and not because it's wrongly designed or it means to hurt us, but simply that we're just pushing against the gears. But that doesn't. I don't think that means you can't do a multi-person project in this. It just means that you have to choose things that work within that that sort of design constraint, if I may put it that way. Thanks.
All right. Big topic. So, Mary Beth, we're nearing about 5 minutes left in today's session. It has to be, we could continue on forever. Since this is your kind of session, how would you like to summarize what you've heard today? Give us some feedback, thoughts, maybe direction for future.
So I think it was good for us for me to express some of the challenges, some of the opportunities, and kind of some of the value and benefits that everybody's looking for. I didn't know Heidi Lamar, whoever that was, Hadley invented Wi-Fi, so that was a pretty cool thing. but I like the idea about having more control. So I think that's really where we're going with this. So how much control do you want? And how much are you willing to give up? I think is the question. And that's kind of where I want to end it with, if that's okay. How much control do you want? How much are you willing to give up? How's that for
Yeah, and one final comment on that though is with great power comes great responsibility. Right? So if you do take on that control, you are now accountable and responsible, and do you really want that? And I find that most people don't. They'd actually just want to press the button and have it work. And that's the conundrum we have. But yeah. Anybody else have any parting thoughts, comments? David, Roger, haven't heard from you in all the night. Win.
So I want to ask a question while you're waiting here. Why are there no other women on this call besides me?
It's not like they're not invited or that it's not open. Anybody can show up at any time. So what are your thoughts?
Well, is it something that perhaps the entire Tinderbox community is very male centric? I don't see a lot of women showing up in the forum either. So what is it about the tool that is appealing to men and less so to women? I guess I'll go bug my wife a little bit about that.
Yeah. Like my son's adopted it. My daughter says, hell no. It's just,
Right.
I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah. Paul.
Well,
I think
could it be that
I don't. Just quickly, I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much. When my car is standing out in the driveway and the hood's up, all the guys in the neighborhood come around and ask me what I'm looking at, and none of the women do. And I don't take that as a societal problem. I just say, yeah, I mean, that's the way it is. When I bring home the car from the showroom, all people from the neighborhood come over and look at it. I mean, it's just a difference of what we're about here.
Good summary.
So quick thought is just thinking about this and I think back to, I mean, when I did my PhD, we were a cohort of about 20, actually, half men, half women. And most of the girls were less interested in tools. So that maybe this is part of the thing is that thinking back on this, now you ask a question, is the observation probably was they were much more interested in the content in the story than how it was created. So if you are taking up, I think it's Paul's point, so just having the hood up on the car, the tool, for some people it just isn't interesting. Where the car might go, or what it might do, much more interesting. But it's also very hard to guess what other people don't understand. I think is the other thing I would take away from decades of doing this. I think all I've learned is the longer I live, the less I appear to know. But the joy is you keep on learning.
I think that's a great close here.
Absolutely. Well, Mary Beth, thank you very much for kicking this off today. I really appreciate it.
Woohoo!
Michael,
Awesome.
thank you.
Very much. Thank you for the courage, Mary Beth.
Yeah, and we have we have a link to our software, our mobile marketing collaboration tools. If you want to get on there, we have a link that we can give you all access at no cost. So
have you drop it in the chat, Michael, Mary Beth, or is that? We have to ask directly.
It says we, but I don't actually have it.
It's a friends and family link. You go on to LinkedIn and send me, I can post it there. I don't want to put it in there for the use, but we do have for friends and family. We have a link, and so we have a limited amount of licenses that we can give away.
Okay.
And it just came out last week, by the way. Like it is brand new. Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
And we're very excited about it because it's been a labor of love, and you kind of heard the story about how it started here today. I mean, through a lot of hardship, but very valuable to the community in marketing, and maybe there's some collaboration we can do with Tinderbox as well. on it, and kind of, build the marketing on a mobile for mobile devices. I know it's a laptop device right now, but at some point it could go mobile. Again, when I was traveling around the world, I couldn't use it because it didn't have.
And again, just on that note, though, to what Mr. Anderson and other people's comments, not every tool can solve every problem, right? Right. Not every problem can be addressed with a hammer. To build a house, it actually takes a whole host of tools and skills. So that's why when you mentioned earlier, he made me install Obsidian. Well, yeah, because that's an ideal note capturing idea tool for when you're out in remote, right? So Obsidian works great on a cross-platform and on mobile. Tinderbox does not. So that's where you start merging different tools into the workflow. And that goes back to what I would like to think about what Andreas was talking about earlier, is his point about AppleScript. Like it takes an ecosystem of tools to really make all of this work, and Tinderbox just happens to sit in the center at a really important point. Yeah.
Fantastic.
All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Michael.
Bye-bye.
I had one last thing.
Oh, yeah. Go, Wayne. Go. Yeah, please.
I just posted it in the chat. I just made a Git repository for us to mess around with a Tinderbox file in Git. We'll figure out the rules for it. But if you sort of request access to commit on it, and I generally know who you are, I'll let you, and we can just try changes in Tinderbox to see how well it behaves with Git merges. And because we all do things differently, we are more likely to uncover things that I'm going to find out trying to do it myself.
Yeah, and I just sent you an email on that. Can you and I set up a one-on-one collaboration with Git, and then we'll document that. That would be fun, and we can get started.
So feel free to grab the link, and if you like messing around with Git, try it out.
Sweet. All right, everybody, this was great. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks, Mary Beth.
Okay, welcome.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.